Natalie and Jose from Southport campus. We are going to pray today in Spanish for our service and our beautiful family. So let's start. Gracias Dios por nuestra familia, por nuestros amigos aquí en Australia, por la ayuda, por los buenos momentos que pasamos. Te damos gracias, Señor, por el día de hoy y te encomendamos el servicio de hoy, que aprendamos mucho.
Gracias, Señor, por la oportunidad de podernos permitir compartir con una gran familia, Señor. Una familia, Señor, la que siempre nos ha apoyado, ha compartido en momentos complicados y en momentos alegres. Te pedimos, Señor, que seas tú bendiciendo a tu iglesia y que independientemente de las circunstancias por las cuales pasamos, Dios, tu voluntad y tu palabra siempre, Señor, quede en nuestros corazones. Te queremos, Señor, en el nombre de tu amado Jesucristo. Amén y amén.
G'day everyone, how are you all? It's great to have you with us. Hey, this is Luke and Danielle Gibbons. We're going to chat to them later in our service this morning. Luke and Danielle, welcome to the Gold Coast. Here we go. They're gone. Oh no, we're going to chat to Luke and Danielle later. Anyway, great you could join us this morning on Crosslife Online and our broadcast. You all know my wife Robin, who's going to host this morning with me as well. It was fantastic to have Natalie and Jose pray this morning. They prayed in Spanish. We're going to try and do that every time we get together. So we look forward to hearing more of that. Thank you, Natalie and Jose, for praying. They thank God for the family across that we're a part of. They pray for our service this morning as we chatted. Okay, Jimmy, come on, come back and join us. There you are, mate. How are you?
Good, mate. And now I thought you might have wanted my help with the Spanish translation, but you did pretty well. So.
How's your Spanish class going, Matt? Is it going all right?
Well, Jose and Natalie are actually my Spanish teachers. They're the ones that help me with my linguistic skills, and they're great people. So it was very good to have them pray.
Fantastic. So today we're in our next message of the new normal. Tell us what the big idea is for today.
So today we're talking about how do we deal with discouragement, particularly when we maybe look back to things that were, maybe the good old days. How do we deal with discouragement? And so we're looking at in terms of the new normal. And Matt, one of the things that some of us may be a little bit discouraged about is, we haven't been able to meet on a Sunday like we used to. You sent an email out this week. Can you tell us a bit about what's happening there?
Sure. Just a comment on that. We aren't able to have service straight away because we're actually a bit bigger than some of the churches that have started to meet. And that was set out in in the email I sent yesterday. We are looking to start as soon as we can, and we're going to need lots of teams of people to help in lots of areas every Sunday that we meet. So part of our process will be to call everyone across up and say, hey, which team can you be a part of if you're able to be a part of one? So expect that phone call over the next 2 weeks, and hopefully out of that we'll then be able to set a time where we can do the things that are needed to put services on in this environment. Where there is certain numbers we can have in our buildings at certain times. That was in the email as well. And if you want to get a copy of that, you can email me. Of course, the other thing we're doing is the team that wrote the paper on services after COVID-19 is going around to more campuses. And this morning they'll be at Southport at 11 o'clock. So if you're at Southport, you want to ask some questions, come and join us at 11 o'clock and we can be talking about that.
And the last couple of weeks, we've been looking at getting you to interact with what's going on via the YouTube chat, and we'd love for that to keep going today. Say hi if you're with a group of friends. Let us know who you're watching with, that sort of thing. And one fun thing we thought would be today to do would be to ask everyone, when have you given up on something, and why did you give up on that? We've got a great story to tell you a little bit later. But what about you, Jimmy? When have you given up on something? And why did you give up?
Well, to be honest with you, my AFL team hasn't won the grand final since 1964 or thereabouts. So I've given up waiting for that to happen. We had a nice win last night, but I've given up. But that's a funny story. But
are you telling us you're no longer a Melbourne supporter, mate? Have you given up on your team?
I still follow with interest, but I think I've given up. Hey, tell me though, Madam Robin, I've seen some pictures. Can you tell me about a story when you guys felt discouraged and you gave up?
Well, actually, I didn't give up, although we did in the end. We were in 1994. We were in South Africa, and we were driving on the Garden Route, which is the southern coastline of South Africa, and we were at a place called the Storms River Mouth. Some of the South Africans may know this sort of place. And it's all there. It is, Tsitsikamma National Park. And you can see up in the top right-hand corner, there's a lookout point. And at this little river mouth, we decided to walk across the suspension bridge and walk up to this lookout to look down. And as we're walking up, and I'm pointing the way, saying, here it is, Robin's going, no, this is the wrong track. There we are, Matthew 1994. The mullet was in. Anyway, and so, no, this is the track. And I kept going, and Robin kept saying, no.
So our conversation went something like, Matt, this isn't the right way. And you
No,
could
it
say,
is.
I'm saying, no, I can see people down there on a different track. This is not a track.
No, I want to get to this lookout. So we kept
No, it's
going,
not.
and we get to the top, and this is the lookout. This is what the view we had. Yeah.
No.
No, we're on the wrong track. And at that point, I said, okay, we'll give up. We'll go back. And we turned around, and we went back down the track, and we went back to the Storms River mouth, and just to see where we went. And because this last photo is me standing, pointing in the direction that we went. And you can see, we should have been.
Where we went. We should have gone straight ahead.
Yeah, we should have gone on the right-hand side and we get up on the left-hand side. So, yeah, we eventually did give up, but I should have given up earlier. I should listen to my wife.
Very good. So, the question we're putting out there today is, when is it time that you gave up? Is that right?
Yeah. What's the story you got when you gave up and why? And put that on the chat and see where we go from there. That's what we're going to talk about today, which would be really good. As I said, Luke and Danielle, who are up briefly with us when we started this morning, you'll be introduced to them a bit later on. They're new to Crosslife since we started online, and maybe there's others of you that are new to Crosslife since we started online. We'd love you to send your details to us on info@crosslife.org.au. And we'll put that email up at different times in the service. And it'll be great to chat to Luke and Danielle later. But right now, we're going to go to a song from our team as they lead us in Cornerstone.
Hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly trust in Jesus' name. Hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly trust in Jesus' name. Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love. Through the storm, He is Lord, Lord of all. When darkness seems to hide His face, I rest on His unchanging grace. Through every high and stormy gale, my anchor holds within the veil. My anchor shall come with trumpet sound. Oh, may I then in him be found, dressed in his righteousness alone, faultless stand before the throne.
Well, here we are. We've got Ezra and Naomi and Evan with us here, and we're going to ask them some questions that we've been discussing as well in the service. So, Naomi, you ready? Here's the first question for you, because it's got to be ladies first, doesn't it? So here we go. Your question is, Naomi, tell me what things were like in the olden days.
Well, they didn't have very nice clothes like we do, and they don't have cars.
They didn't have cars in the olden days. Mate, you are going back a long way. That's good to hear. Fantastic. What about you, Ezra? What do you think things were like in the olden days?
You didn't have hopscotch?
Yeah. Do you play hopscotch, mate?
Not really, but I do
Not
at
really?
my school sometimes.
Okay. And what about you, Evan? What do you reckon things were like in the olden days?
There were lots of wars and there weren't many computers.
That's true. We could never do what we're doing now in the olden days, could we? This is all current days, not olden days. All right, Evan, I'm going to ask you the second question. What things make you feel like giving up?
When I get overwhelmed,
Yeah. And that you just feel like giving up because you just can't do stuff. No, get it away from me. What about you, Ezra? What makes you feel like giving up?
When someone doesn't let me have a turn after waiting a long time.
So you find when you got to wait too long, that's it. I'm walking away. I'm not staying around anymore. Yep, that's a good answer. And Naomi, what things make you feel like giving up?
Some things that are way too hard to do.
I just can't get there. Hey, has anyone ever given up on running a race, like a running race, and it's just too long to finish the race? No? I'll confess, I did that once. It was a long race, and I just couldn't keep running, and I just walked the last little bit. I nearly felt like giving up. All right, here's our third question. I'm going to ask Ezra, you first this time, because you haven't had the first go to question yet. So the question is, Ezra, how can you tell if God is with you?
When he blesses me with hope, peace, and love.
Oh, fantastic, mate.
Well, that's not it, though.
That's not it?
I have even more in it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad. I hope you had hope, peace, and love for the rest of your life, brother. Righto, Evan, what makes you, how can you tell that God's with you?
well, I feel his peace.
Yep.
And I feel calm and relaxed.
Yep. That's good to see. It gives you a sense of peace and rest. Righto, Naomi, how can you tell if God is with you?
Well, he always is because he's in our heart.
So he's never far away.
Mm-mm.
In fact, there's a passage in Philippians chapter 4, I think it's verse 4, that says Jesus is near. He could just be round the corner. And that's a great thing to know. All right. Thank you, Evan. Thank you, Ezra. And thank you, Naomi, for taking this time for me to interview you today for those 3 questions. And I hope you've been watching and you can see how other people have answered these sort of questions too. God bless and thank you very much. I'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Mate, I enjoyed doing that. Maybe you could tell.
So good.
We just want to continue to show that the church is all ages, really, aren't they? You know, younger, older, it doesn't matter. And it was great to hear from Evan and Ezra and Naomi yesterday. Mate, I can say this. They are all bigger than the last time I saw them. A bit like your kids. Like, they're big. Anyway, so, mate, look at some of the comments there, Jimmy.
Yeah, I think we let's put up Lom's comment. He was talking about he had to stop being a missionary in 1997 because of his health, and so that's a great comment. And I actually know of someone else, similar thing, because of health, had to, if you want to use the word, give up on that path. So interesting. If you have other comments on something that you had to give up on, please write them in the comments. That would be great. Oh, Hannah, here we go. I gave up on being of my dream of becoming a professional netball player. There you go.
I would never thought that. I mean, that's like a secret, Hannah. You're an athlete. You should be celebrating that.
That's good. So we're going to go to interviewing Luke and Danielle now and hearing from them about their journey to being here on the coast.
That's right. We're going to bring them back in. Hey, Luke. Hey, Danielle. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having us on today.
That's all right. Now, tell us a little bit about yourselves.
So we met back in 2015 after I went to the US to work in Florida for a film studio, a Christian film studio, and we met on a film set 3 weeks after I arrived, didn't we?
Yes, and I prayed for an Australian. And a couple weeks later, I sat next to him, and then 2 years later, we got married and I moved down to Florida. So that was in South Carolina and in the States.
And so we lived in Florida for, well, I was there for 4.5 years, and then we moved back to Australia in December,
yes.
And then we thought, we'd try and apply for jobs and that kind of stuff as we moved back. And then bushfires hit, COVID-19 hit, and so that was a lot of fun. And so we were based up in Mount Beauty in Northeast Victoria for that time, and then thankfully we got a job, and I got a job, and we moved to the Gold Coast just about a month ago now.
So after you moved up to the Gold Coast, I guess you wanted to, as Christian people, wanted to connect with a Christian community, but there were no services to go to. How did you go about
that's right.
a Christian community in your new setting?
Yeah, so Google became our new friend in trying to search for a church, didn't it?
Yeah, so we kind of took turns. Luke picked the first church, and it's not like it was a bad experience, but it just didn't feel at home. And so we did that a couple of Sundays, and we were already used to doing church online. But then he said, it's your turn. He wanted to sleep in a little bit. Your turn to figure it out. Danielle was like, okay, fine. So I just Googled churches nearby. Some were closed, which was a bit sad. They didn't offer any online services. And we had already checked out a few of them that I saw through the list. And then I saw this one, Crosslife. So I clicked on it and I read your values, and it aligned with what we believed in. And I saw that you had 3 campuses. And so I read each one, and I was like, let's just try it. Why not? And then we got onto your stream. We just clicked on and you were live. And that was a bit interesting. We haven't seen the interaction before. So it made us feel comfortable, and it made us feel like, we're a part of this. They're talking to us. They're asking us to interact with them. And then what really, really hit home for me was you talked about business afterwards. You were open about what you were doing, what services you were going to have, and you really communicated well. And I find that very important in church. So we were sold.
And we got invited over to a barbecue that next week, I think it was, and introduced really to some people. So it was really good just to get to know people. Even in this virtual world, we can still get connected and get looped in. So it was great.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
So you have looked at churches online before. So is it different trying to find a church online as against doing it face to face? I've never done that. I must feel quite different doing it that way.
Yeah, I think, when we moved to Florida, we went to find churches and we went and sat in different churches, and we're like, I don't know about this church, don't know about that church. And, it's not that it's just that we didn't feel connected. And so when you find a church in person, like someone will come up and talk to you, you know that you feel welcomed. It's a bit harder to do that online, but I think you guys have done that really well. So that really helped us get connected.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's funny how things have unfolded as we've gone ahead. The whole chat thing was not something we did early on, but now we're trying to promote it now. I mean, even hearing what Lynette's just written down from Lorelei, saying that, God is near. He's always in our hearts and he holds our hand to get through. And that's, Lynette, I've forgotten how old Lorelei is. She might be 9, might be 10, or might be 7. I don't know, but there we go. What a fantastic thing to hear from one of our kids. And so the opportunity, there was something that God's just unfolded amongst us, which is great, which is fantastic. So, Luke, you're living in Hope Island. You're looking forward to meeting in our services eventually as well, I expect. Is that right? Meeting some other people?
Yeah, we're looking forward to getting to know lots more people at the church and that kind of stuff. We're not really sure which campus we're going to go to yet, but
Any, mini, miny, mo. That's what we're going to do.
We'll figure that out as everything opens back up again.
That'd be fantastic. Well, look, others of us may well have joined Crosslife since we've gone online, like Luke and Danielle have done, and we'd love you to send your details to info@crosslife.org.au. That'll be on the bottom of the screen now. And if you're able to send your details to us, as you feel free. We're not going to force you to do it, but if you'd like to get some of these papers we're writing and other information, we need your email address to be in contact with you or these sort of things. So please, if you'd like to say, hey, I've just been starting to come online the last couple of months, I'd love to know more about it. One of the great ways you can do it is to send your details to info@crosslife.org.au. And if you can do that, that'd be fantastic. Oh, here we go. Mel Funk said, Luke and Danielle, we're also in Hope Island. Look forward to meeting you in person one day soon. So there you go, mate. You've got a name. And I know, Mel, Robin does too.
I work in Hope Island.
Oh, that was just a word from our sponsors. No, not really. Anyway, it's great to meet you guys, and we're going to continue to welcome others as well as we are able. But we're going to have another time of worship now with our music team as they lead us in our next song before our message. After this, we'll go straight to our message from the book of Haggai from Jimmy.
Draw me close to you. Never let me go. I lay it all down again to hear you say that I'm your friend. You were my desire. No one else will do. 'Cause nothing else could take your place. To feel the warmth of your embrace. Help me find a way. Bring me back to you. Draw me close to you. Never let me go. I lay it all down again to hear you say that I'm your friend. just will do. 'Cause nothing else could take your place. To feel the warmth of your embrace. Help me find a way and bring me back to you. You're all I want. You're all I've ever needed. You're all I want. Help me know you are near. You're all I want. You're all I've ever needed. You're all I want. Help me know you are near. Help me know you are
We've looked at a couple of things. Firstly, we looked at Jeremiah chapter 29, and we looked at the idea that God is still king in the midst of change. Even in the new normal, everything is under God. Secondly, we looked at the idea that as we navigate through the unknown, we have to make sure that we don't do things in our own strength, but we let the Spirit of God work in us and through us. Thirdly, we looked at the idea that we are to invest our resources in God's pleasure and glory and honor first. And today we're going to look at the idea of, as we navigate through the new normal, how we can navigate discouragement. Now we're looking at the message that God gave the Israelites through the prophet Haggai. I want to quickly give some background information to this. Matt mentioned this last week, but I think it's good to look at it again. Haggai ministers during the year of 520 BC. And 18 years earlier, in 538 BC, the emperor of Persia, Cyrus, allowed the Jews to come out of exile and go back to the land of Judah. And they were governed by a guy called Zerubbabel. And you can read about that in Ezra chapter 1. Now, when the Israelites return out of exile, they come face to face with the old temple ruins, thanks to the Babylonians. And the very first thing they do is they build an altar before the Lord on the old site of Solomon's temple. The Israelites also prepare to rebuild the temple, but they're stopped in their tracks by their neighboring enemies. And so what unfolds for the next 16 years is that they build houses for themselves, but the Lord's house remains untouched, until the prophets Haggai and Zechariah come along and challenge the people. Now, when Haggai begins to minister, Darius takes the throne of the Persian Empire. And what's amazing is he commands and allows the reconstruction of the Lord's temple. And so this is the time that Haggai speaks to the people. And Haggai's main concern is to arouse his countrymen to start the rebuild of this temple. Now, when you read through chapter 1 of Haggai, one of the key verses is verse 7, where you pick up this theme. It says, "This is what the Lord Almighty says. Give careful thought to your ways." And then verse 8, "Go up to the mountains and bring down timber and build the house, so that I may take pleasure in it and be honored." So you see, this key message was, build the house. The house of worship must be restored. Now, it's amidst this backdrop that Haggai begins his ministry. And when we pick up chapter 2, it's probably been about a month or so of these Israelites starting the work of rebuilding the temple. Now, I want you to stop right now and have a moment to think on this. I want you to think of a time in your life where you felt most discouraged. For me, I can look back to the time where I got my year 12 results, and I worked really hard. That might not seem likely to some of you, but I worked really hard, night and day almost. And I remember the time when I got my results, and in those days it came out in the newspaper. And I remember I got the newspaper as soon as I could, and I looked at the paper and I saw my name, and then I scrolled my finger along to the number next to my name. And it wasn't a bad result, but I just wanted more. I expected better. And that's kind of the heart of discouragement. What lies in front of you is not what you expected. What lies in front of you is not what you expected. And some of you can think through your past circumstances, and what lied in front of you was not what you expected, and you felt great discouragement. For the Israelites who had returned out of exile, they stood there on these temple ruins. And some of the people were alive when they saw the splendor of this temple that Solomon built. Others had heard about how majestic this temple was. I'm sure many had spoken with great nostalgic delight in what had been constructed. Yet now this temple was reduced to rubble. And the people understood that they couldn't pay for the craftsmen the way Solomon had done so. The people understood that they couldn't line the interior of the temple with gold the way Solomon had done so. And so you can picture the people standing on this old site. Maybe children playing on top of stones that have been fallen down. And it's this incredible picture of discouragement. Even some of the people who had come out of exile were discouraged because they tried to start rebuilding it, but they were stopped in their tracks by the enemy. And this is exactly what Haggai says in chapter 2. If you have a look at verse 3, he says this: "Who of you is left who saw this house in its former glory? How does it look to you now? Does it not seem to you like nothing?" Does it not seem to you like nothing? There was this heavy layer of discouragement. Now, if we're honest with each other, we all know what discouragement tastes like. In this country, the number one reason why pastors or ministers leave or quit ministering is because of discouragement. And we all sort of know what it's like when we labor and toil for something and we don't see fruit. It's incredibly discouraging. Even amidst this coronavirus, it's easy to taste discouragement. Many of our jobs are indifferent. Many of our jobs, are in jeopardy. Life is different. There is great uncertainty. And even as a church body, we can't meet together like we used to. And that's important for us. We encourage each other when we get together, but we can't do that. And even when we can meet together in the coming month, or whenever that is, it'll be different. Singing will be different. We can't sing together. We can't fit as many people in the room like we used to. And so many of us will feel discouraged. How do you deal with discouragement? Well, I want to talk about two things that the prophet Haggai points us to when we're dealing with discouragement. And the first thing I want to say is this: we need to understand that God will do more than we can imagine. God will do more than we can imagine. Whatever circumstances we are in, however discouraging things are, God will use such circumstances for his glory. Now, towards the end of the passage we're looking at, I want you to read what God says to the people. This is in Haggai chapter 2, and from verse 6 it says this: "This is what the Lord Almighty says. In a little while I will once more shake the heavens and the earth, the sea and the dry land." Verse 7, "I will shake all nations, and the desired of all nations will come, and I will fill this house with glory, says the Lord Almighty. The silver is mine, and the gold is mine, declares the Lord." In other words, what God says is, in a little while, I'm going to intervene. Now, this mention here of earthquakes, it's kind of symbolic for God's supernatural intervention. And so God points to a time where he will intervene in a supernatural way. where he will orchestrate that other nations will gladly give their treasures to the rebuild of this temple. How is that possible? Well, God says in verse 8, he says, everything is mine, even the gold and silver, it's all mine. And history tells us that that this prophecy comes to fruition. If you read in Ezra chapter 6, those who opposed the rebuild of this temple were ordered to pay for the construction of this temple out of their own treasuries. And in fact, if you look at history, Herod the Great and many of his successors gave great wealth to the forming of this temple. Now, I'm telling you this for a reason. These Israelites were standing on the rubble of this old site. It was incredibly discouraging. They were poor, conditions were hard, yet God used these circumstances to reflect his greatness and glory. So I want you to think about this. How remarkable and how mind-boggling is it that God would orchestrate other nations, other people, to give out of their treasuries towards the build of this temple? God used seemingly discouraging circumstances to reflect his greatness all the more. I want you to understand, if you feel discouraged about the state of where things are, what might seem hopeless, God can use for his glory. God can and will do more than we can ever imagine. Now, the second thing I want to do and talk about in terms of dealing with discouragement is this. What you and I need to understand in the face of discouragement is that God is with us. This is a key message that God gives to the people through the prophet Haggai. God says to his people, I am with you. The people are standing on the rubble of the old temple. Those who remember what it was like are feeling crushed. They remember the good old days. And they realize that what is going to come, what could be rebuilt, is not going to be what it was like. They remember the good old days and they're discouraged. And in the midst of this, God speaks. Have a look at verse 4. God says this. But now, be strong, O Zerubbabel, declares the Lord. Be strong, O Joshua, son of Jehozadak, the high priest. Be strong, all you people of the land, declares the Lord, and work, for I am with you, declares the Lord Almighty. Be strong. This has striking similarities to what was commanded to an earlier Joshua, earlier in history. When the Israelites were standing there before the promised land, God said to Joshua, be strong and courageous, for I am with you. And so God says to the Israelites, standing before the temple ruins in the midst of discouragement, he says, all of you people, you can be strong. He doesn't just say to one person, you can be strong. He actually says, all of the people here, you can be strong. And he doesn't just say, all of you people can be strong. He says, all of you people can be strong and work. In other words, go about the task God has given you. How can they be strong and go about the task God has given them? God says, for I am with you, says the Lord Almighty. I want you to have a look at verse 5 here. This is a beautiful verse. It says this. This is what I covenanted with you when you came out of Egypt, and my spirit remains among you. Do not fear. So here we're pointed back to God's covenant he made with the people as they came out of slavery in Egypt. What does it mean for God to be with us? Well, God says this here in verse 5. He says, the same power that I used to bring my people out of Egypt and when I parted the sea and I saved them out of slavery, that same power I will use to help you and strengthen you and protect you. If you feel discouraged because things aren't like they used to be, you can be strong and you can get on with doing the task God has given you because God is with you. You know, if we jump to the New Testament By the time Jesus began his ministry, the temple that Haggai had been trying to get the people to rebuild had been built. Now, it gets destroyed again by the Romans later, but that's a different story. But Jesus is standing there by this temple, and Matt talked about this last week. As Jesus stands there at the temple, he says this in John chapter 2. He says this, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days." The Jews replied, "It has taken 46 years to build this temple, and you are going to raise it in 3 days?" But the temple he had spoken of was his body. Here's what's interesting. Jesus stands before the temple and he says, "Destroy the temple and I will raise it in 3 days." Jesus is pointing to this idea that after his death and resurrection, he will supersede the temple. In the Old Testament, people met God at the temple. In the New Testament, in the Gospels as we read, it's because of Christ, God can meet us in Jesus. Essentially, Haggai points us to Christ. And if you look at Mark chapter 6, there's this great story of the disciples being out on the lake. And it's midnight, it's dark, and Jesus sees them and he walks towards them. And the passage tells us that he walks on water. And as he's walking towards them, it says in the passage that the disciples are petrified, they're terrified. And Jesus says this to them. He says, "Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid." Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid. These words are strikingly similar to the words God spoke through his prophet Haggai to the people feeling great discouragement at the rebuild of the temple. If you follow Jesus, his very presence gives courage. He gives us determination. He gives us a conviction that his cause will not fail. And so he says to you, take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid. If you feel discouraged, God will use these circumstances for his glory. And if you follow Jesus, you can be strong and carry on the task that God has given you. Because Jesus lives in you. The very presence of God is with you. Don't give up. Seek him. Bask in his presence. Discouragement does not need to define you. I am with you, says the Lord Almighty. I am with you.
Thanks, Jimmy. That was really great. Thank you for the encouragement and yet the challenge as well. So how would you see that we could be putting that into practice this week?
Yeah, I think there's one thought this week on that moment when you're feeling down and discouraged or frustrated, and we all will be there at one point. When we get to that place, I think we've got to stop ourselves and we just remember these two things: that God will use these circumstances for his glory, and secondly, God is with us. We're not alone. He is with us, and his power is in us and working through us. So I think those two things we've got to stop and reflect on, and I think it'll change our perspective when we walk through those times where we think back, this is not like it used to be, or I'm frustrated, or whatever it is. But those two things I think are really powerful.
And that he can do more than you imagine. Absolutely.
Yeah, I found that on Friday when I was writing this email, which was quite discouraging. Things won't be what they used to be. All the stuff I've been trained to do, that it doesn't go out the door, but it's all going to be different now. And I know people want to meet together, and I've got to write and say we've still got to wait. And I felt quite discouraged, being a bearer of bad tidings in a sense. And yet I think what you're saying is right, and I found that helpful. I have to remind myself this is not just human manipulation or human working out. Indeed, this is actually where God is taking us. And that's why I've appreciated the teams writing these papers, the prayers of our intercessors, the prayers of our elders. Whatever we do is good when we know God is leading us and God is with us as we do it. That's where the encouragement comes. And I felt that at times on Friday when I wrote that quite detailed, long email about stuff that in one respect I wish I never would have to write. But if it's where God's taking us, I'm really glad that I wrote it. I'm really glad that we can walk this journey to say, yeah, it will be different. It will be not what it was before. And that's not easy, but it's okay because the Lord's building the house and our work is not in vain. And that keeps you going when you're discouraged. Helps you not give up. Like I didn't want to give up on that lookout walk because I knew where we were going, but that was all me. That's why that was discouraging.
And Matt, you can pray for us now.
Yeah.
Pray for us as a community.
Yeah, Lord, we want to thank you that you are a God of encouragement. That even when times can be discouraging, that you are with us, like Naomi and Ezra and Evan said to us, that you're with us and you can give us peace and encouragement and all the things that we yearn for in our circumstances, that our circumstances fall short to give us. I pray as we go into this week, no matter what circumstances are around in our family, in our workplaces, the news that we don't know now that someone might get this week, it comes out of the blue, whatever it might be, that we'd remember these words that Jimmy has shared with us today, that's got out of the book of Haggai, that you are with us and you can do more than we can ever imagine. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Just to remind a few things going on. We're no longer up at Coomera today, but I will be down at Southport at 11 o'clock with the services team. If you want to come and visit and have a chat to us about some of this stuff, Merv and Maureen Arde will be at Helensvale. So you can, if you want to hop to Helensvale, bring an offering of food. That's what's going on there. Jimmy, what are you up to today? You're going to be down at Southport as well, I suppose.
I'll be here with you, mate. And so 11 o'clock.
Fantastic. And then at 3:30 this afternoon, we have our next small praise and worship gathering. Ashton Ward and myself are going to be leading a great time at Helensvale at 3:30. So there's still spaces to come along and join us there. Please come and do that. You guys think you're doing that at Southport at some stage the next week or two, Jimmy?
Yeah, we've earmarked next Sunday sometime to do that. So there'll be an email this week with an invitation. Obviously, it is restricted with how many people we can have, but we will have some sort of worship time next Sunday, yeah.
I think it's a great idea. I'm loving doing these things. So these kinds of things. We'll try one up at Coomera soon as well. So, yeah. Anyway, well, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. God bless. Go into this week with the God who does more than you can even imagine, and we'll come back next week as we continue to look at the new normal together. God bless.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. See you.
Ha 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 ha!